Good afternoon, everyone. Researchers now saying Burgundy's vineyards haven't been this hot and dry since the Black Death, 14th century. I thought, all right, I just saw this article here. This year's cold spring to blame for French wine output falling 12%. Going back to the spring, fighting the cold and the frost, unusual. Left side, 1444. Digging into this research on the article going back to the 1300s, where was this reset in our calendar and our history? You want to talk about the Black Death? Great. Let's go back and talk about Tartaria. Let's talk about the mud floods and the liquefaction during the Grand Solar Minimums. Let's talk about the micronova from our sun on cyclic patterns every 12,000 years, witnessed by the ancients, petroglyphs marking the living skies that we're going to see again starting right now. Why don't we talk about the ancient societies, the ancient civilizations using wireless technology, wireless energy delivery? Let's just talk about how hot it is. Let's start over here on Zero Hedge. They're referencing an article here from Bloomberg saying that the Burgundy's vineyards haven't been this hot and dry since the Black Death. So I go to a PDF search engine to look for what's referenced here. 300 different peer-reviewed research reports that are so easily findable. You know what? I couldn't find them. Where are your references in any of this stated fact? But before delving into the lack of references for any of that research, let's take a look at this year's research. Spring cold to blame for French wine output falling by 12%. Yet in the very same breath they say, oh, it's the hottest ever, that it's, what? This year's cold spring to blame for French wine output battered by intense cold during the spring months. And I said, yeah, I've done several videos on this where they had to light candles to try to fight the cold with helicopters to push air down to prevent freezing. And over here on Electroverse also, France averages the coldest May morning since 1979. Great, it's a couple days during the cold, but could it be cooler? Yeah, let's go back to 2016, 17, 18. Cold snap, preventing grapes from freezing. Winemakers deploy candles yet again and again and again. Fourth year in a row of extreme cold. Vineyard production lost. Burgundy hit by worst frost since 1981. Wow, that is so hot. How could it possibly be the warmest since the 14th century when we just had 4 years of cold? You know, and I used Yahoo because I didn't go to DuckDuckGo and I didn't want to use Google. I wanted to be right in the center there. So we used Yahoo to find the best information. And if they're carrying it as a mainstream media source, whatever you like to term that, unbelievable. And dropping back into this inconvenient chart right here referenced with the coldest morning since 1979, Burgundy region, left side 1947 starting and moving to the right, getting a bit warmer. It peaks and then it drops back off to where we are now. But wait, I thought the researchers who had all these 300 peer-reviewed research papers, which I can't find in a PDF search engine or online, where are their references? I want to go to those directly and research the researchers. Can't find it. So how is that possible that they're stating it's the warmest since the 13th century? And here we are, it's dropping off in temperatures. Oh, forget this inconvenient Tasmanian record cold and polar chill to grip Central Europe here at the end of August and early September. Forget that. Pretty color on the charts here. Ooh, red is fortuitous in the Chinese culture. Must be good luck looking at this picture. But the article specifically references the legendary hot summer of 1540. And I thought, all right, let's dig into there. I found this one out of 300. Why the summer of 1540 was likely warmer than 2003. That throws a cog into the works of the Bloomberg article. Nonetheless, left side 1444, bringing us up to 2005 on the right side of the chart. Now, what looks completely out of place here is the Dalton minimum and the Maunder minimum decreases in wine production during the cooler years, 1640 all the way to 1698. You'll see that drop off there. And also right around 1805, you'll see another drop off. Heat spike, oh, that's a natural heat spike. In the 1860s, coming out of the Dalton minimum, But remember, this is an 11-year moving average of the grape harvest. It's interesting, 11 years is on the solar cycle as well. But I'd like you to look just for a second. Do you see anything that's so far out of the averages here that you would go, wow, that is so different? Even on the upward levels, you'll see that in the 1800s as well as the 1500s, it was warmer than today. So them trying to prove the point, if it's warmer back in the 1500s, 1300s, just doesn't float. And here, let's take a look at 4 different temperature data sets. Blue being the 1540s era, and you'll only see one time out of these 3 that it might be warmer, overlaid by the exceptional conditions in grape growing varieties. Blue means better harvest, blue means warmer. Also digging out a couple other reports which are linked in the description box below. This is the grape harvests going back to 1506 in all the regions across France. Now I will ask you to look at this, and do you see anything that is so far out of the standard deviation that you go, wow, that is so far above or so far below what we see in the averages that it just so stands out where it stops you in your tracks and says, wait a second, that's an outlier for sure. I personally don't, but that's my own opinion. So you can stop this chart here, or you can go to the direct PDF, which is linked in the description box below, and do some of your own research. Now the nugget inside this 1540 was likely warmer than 2003 report here was the split and the reset of history. Right there in the center, you're going to see the movement from the Julian calendar into the Gregorian calendar. And I thought, you know, that is incredibly strange how the reset in history occurs right in the 1700s. I've been watching a fair few videos talking about churches not being heated during the time, fireplaces malfunctioning and not creating the amount of heat that they would need across palaces in Europe, that there seemed to be a different type of climate going on, and there's some dispute about the real years of our previous history in the timeline of then to now. Which brings me right up to Tartaria. Again, what is this? A lost civilization here that used to be across our planet with the same technology? Are we talking about the same peoples who had wireless technology that we no longer have access to? Because the more maps you dig into, the more you start to see this Tartaria listed across global maps. Now, where is it? I didn't learn about that in my history books. And the mud flood evidence, wow, it really starts to show that there's liquefaction during grand solar minimums, and it seemed that during the 1800s, the Dalton minimum had an enormous amount of liquefaction events all the way from the Mississippi Delta over to eastern Carolinas and west out into Arizona. Burying buildings constructed in the late 1700s, and I encourage you to do as much research as you can on mud flood evidence. Because if you want to talk about cycles, part of our history is absolutely missing in the timeline. These micronovas from our sun occurring on regular 12,000 year periods, or what you want to call a super flare, it's one and the same, whatever you like to call it. But the ancients have witnessed this. The petroglyphs record it, yet somehow we're just supposed to dismiss it. And talking about prior civilizations, oh, that's a no-no. Where do these pyramids come from? Where is their wireless technology? Where's this missing chapter of history? Not allowed to talk about it, but you know what? Now with this changing climate, we're starting to see a lot more of what was previously buried emerging out of lakes, reservoirs, and things that were naturally covered because of all the changing climate on a multi-thousand-year cycle. What were the deities? What was revered and worshipped? Why do we see the same iconography across history? The bull, the angels, the wings, the Anunnaki, the Sumerians. It all keeps flowing back into this cyclical pattern that we are not privy to in our history books. And it all comes back into this cyclical pattern of rise and fall of civilizations, of rise and fall of society itself. The reset and bottlenecks in DNA, it's cyclical. There's been a concerted effort, in my own opinion, through history to erase our history. Looking back pre-Egyptian, we see the same. The bulls, the rams, the lions, the feathers, the serpents, the feminine divine. So going back to the 14th century and talking about the Black Death, great. But why was there that shift in the calendars so discernible in the early 1700s? Now the more research I've done, the more I think it was to just shift what we know in the timeline of human history. You can find more information about the cycles about to repeat right now again in Climate Revolution, the Grand Solar Minimum, Understand, Prepare, Adapt, and Thrive. The link's in the description box below, and I appreciate you watching the video. Hope you got something out of it. The cycle's here again. Another bottleneck is coming. Economy, commerce, population, and the availability of our planet to grow enough food to feed everybody. We're here again. Nobody's talking about the solutions we need, but I hope you do. The link's in the description box below, and it's another way to support the Adapt 2030 channel.